All right, today we're going to try and demystify one of the 20th century's most important and, let's be honest, most confusing thinkers, Michel Foucault. You see his name everywhere. His ideas have shaped so much of how we think. But what was he actually getting at?
And right there, that's the big puzzle, isn't it? Foucault is this absolute giant of modern thought, but trying to get a handle on his philosophy can feel like, I don't know, trying to nail Jell-O to a wall. He's incredibly important, but he's also incredibly slippery. So today, our goal is to get a grip on that Jell-O.
And I'm not kidding about his influence. It's just massive. It stretches out into pretty much every corner of the humanities. Feminist theory, sociology, history, you name it. Foucault didn't just add a few ideas to these fields. In a lot of ways, he completely rewired how they work.
Now, part of the confusion is that Foucault totally resisted being put into a neat little box. So if you're looking for some straightforward political plan or a simple, clean theory, you're not going to find it here. He actually embraced contradictions. And for him, changing his mind wasn't a flaw, it was the whole point of thinking.
Okay, so let's dive in. To really get Foucault, you first have to understand the unique way he looked at things. He wasn't just interested in giving new answers, he was interested in questioning the questions themselves.
And this is the first big key to unlocking his work. Foucault didn't just want to know what happened in the past. He wanted to know how we came to think about things the way we do. He was studying the history of knowledge itself, the unspoken rules and categories that shape our reality.
This comparison makes it super clear. You know, a typical historian might ask, what were prisons like in the 18th century? But Foucault steps way back and asks something different. He asks, wait a minute, why did we as a society ever decide that locking people in buildings was the obvious solution for crime in the first place? See, it's a whole other level of inquiry.
So for him, the perspective you use to look at a problem is part of the problem itself. You can't just analyze society without also analyzing the very framework you're using to do the analysis. It's like he was always examining the camera, not just the photograph.
So let's see how this actually works, because this is where it gets really interesting. Foucault's signature move was to take something we all think is just common sense and flip it completely upside down.
Okay, here's a classic example. We all have this image of the Victorian era, right? Super buttoned up, prudish, a time when nobody ever talked about sex. It seems obviously true.
But Foucault comes along and says, nope, you've got it backwards. He argued that this so-called repression didn't lead to silence at all. It actually caused an explosion of talk about sex. Suddenly, doctors, priests, psychiatrists, they were all obsessed with defining it, categorizing it, analyzing it. The effort to shut it up just made everyone talk about it constantly.
All right, let's try another one from his work on madness. The common sense story is that we built asylums because we became more humane. We wanted to help and treat people who were mentally ill. A step forward for civilization, right?
Foucault's reversal here is, well, it's pretty radical. He argued that the category of madness wasn't something we discovered, it was something we invented. Society needed to create an other, the mad, in order to define itself as rational and sane. So locking people away wasn't just about helping them, it was about drawing a line to protect the social order.
Okay, but this method leads to a really big question, a kind of paradox in his work. Foucault is this brilliant critic of power and society, but he's famously cagey about telling us what to do about it.
He's an absolute master at showing us the hidden problems, the subtle ways power operates in our lives. He shines a light on all of it, but then he just stops. He doesn't give you a 5-point plan or tell you what a perfect world would look like.
The philosopher Charles Taylor really nails this frustration. He says Foucault points out all the bad stuff, but then he intentionally backs away from saying that getting rid of it will automatically make things good. And if you're reading him, that can be maddening.
Which brings us to the million-dollar question. What's the point? Seriously, if you're going to tear everything down but offer no alternative, what's the value in that? It's a totally fair question, and it turns out Foucault had an answer.
And the answer is that Foucault wasn't trying to give us a new ideology or a new set of rules to live by. He was trying to give us something, well, something very different.
Remember how he was always changing his mind? This quote tells you everything. He didn't see thinking as a way to arrive at some final, fixed truth. He saw it as a process, an activity, that should change you. He wasn't building a fortress, he was on a journey.
And here it is. This is the master key that unlocks Foucault. His work isn't a blueprint, it's a toolbox.
He's not telling you what to build. He's handing you the tools, the screwdrivers, the wrenches, the crowbars, so you can start taking apart the structures around you, and even the structures inside your own head. So how do you actually use this Foucault toolbox? Well, it's pretty straightforward. First, you take whatever seems obvious and you question it. Second, you start digging into where our so-called truths actually came from. Third, you have to be willing to challenge your own limits, your own assumptions. And the whole point of all this? To free yourself up to think differently, so you can then act differently.
At the end of the day, Foucault wasn't driven by a need to be right or to win an argument. He was driven by this deep, relentless, radical curiosity. He just couldn't stop poking at the things everyone else took for granted and asking, but why? Why this way and not some other way? And this is the beautiful, profound heart of his whole project. The goal of all this thinking and questioning wasn't just to know more about the world. It was to use knowledge as a tool to get free of yourself, to escape the limits of the person you are right now so you can become someone else.
So the real takeaway here isn't a summary of Foucault's books. It's more like an invitation to pick up some of those tools from his toolbox and start looking at your own world with that same kind of fearless curiosity. Which leaves us with one final question to turn back on you. Think about your job, your life, your own beliefs. What's one self-evident truth that you just accept as the way things are? And what might happen if you started to take it apart?